This is the fourth live stream in a series of Saturday virtual concerts that I've been putting on since quarantine started. I intend to continue doing them because every single time I learn a lot more about the technology and get to rediscover music that has inspired me, create new music, and chat with and play with other musicians and artists who then we can collaborate and inspire each other. Inspiration is a theme. If you don't know me, I'm a flautist, composer, improv conductor, and recovering perfectionist based in Los Angeles, California, with strong ties to Austin, Texas. And my guest today is Andres Luz. Hey, Andre, how
Hello,
you
everyone.
doing?
Doing good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for hanging out today. We had meant to meet in person in March in Tucson because we were going to
Yes.
perform this work. You want to tell our friends about that a little bit?
Yeah, I had submitted to the Turn Up Multimedia Festival scheduled in late March in Tucson, Arizona. And then, of course, the world decided to think otherwise. And this was, I got the word that the plans were going to change around mid-March. And, so I thought, well, we'll just have to wait and deal with other things, more pressing things, in the meantime. And but thankfully, Kenzie and I kept in touch, and we thought, well, we should, the show has to move on, and so we thought, Kenzie was gracious enough to set up this set of recitals and chose my piece, and so we're having this sort of informal premiere online, and there it is. So
Although it has been premiered before, I think I accidentally said we were premiering this last week, but you actually premiered it with another flautist. This is just another iteration of that, correct?
yes, well, the folks who commissioned this from me, uh, uh, Jerry Lopez, Matt Deary. Um, sorry, I'm running a blank. He's gonna kill me. Good thing he's not tuned in right now. But Manny Perez, they formed an improvisatory group known as Phase Ensemble, and this was back in September 2018. I just returned here to Redlands, California, Inland Empire, to fulfill a visiting position over at the University of Redlands, and I was very busy, and yet they those folks, they're very they want to come up with new music, present new music for their audiences, and so they twisted my arm, and I was very resistant at first because the first 2 years of teaching are just amazingly busy, and you have to come up with all the course materials and plan and such, and these are my first 2 years really teaching at this level, and but so I sat on it for a while, and they didn't need it anyways, but I kept collecting samples, um, here and there, and I tinkered with it as time moved forth, and I had in mind to make it as simple as possible. So I wanted to compose for my friend Jerry Lopez an improvisatory style piece with electronics, this sort of new genre type I'm kind of developing based upon some goals I have in mind. I don't know if we should talk about that now or should
Yeah,
we?
I would love to hear about that. You and I share a love for improvising music,
Yes,
and
yeah,
also for combining both fixed media and live electronics with traditionally classical instruments. And
yes,
yeah, you shared with me yesterday and the other day about your your larger goals for writing this type of music. This type of music being the three movement piece that I'm gonna perform today. It's largely improvised, but there are guidelines. Yeah, please tell us more about why you did that.
Yeah, this is a totally new approach in my writing style. Basically, I was concerned with two, maybe three main concerns with regards to electronic music. First of all, well, let me backtrack a little bit. A little funny fun fact. Um, Back in 2014, when I was embarking upon my master's degree, I was also a student here at the University of Redlands. Um, it came on my radar that I, might it might do some good for me to take up electronic music, but I was sort of on the fence. Uh, you know, Prior to even thinking about electronic music, if any person were to ask me if I would be interested in electronic music composition, my answer around 2013 would have been not just no, but hell no. And I eat those words, and I eat them humbly and proudly, because of course it ended up being like a runaway train for me. I became obsessed by it, and I was very interested in all the possibilities and the sound palettes capable of taking up this medium. And so that was a game changer for me. In fact, it was this initial change in my path that enabled me to be considered for this position here at the University of Redlands, teaching electronic music for these last 2 years. So that was a good decision. I was very resistant at first, and I've come to really embrace it. And so I see myself, my 2013 self, and maybe before, in some of my students who are required to take electronic music, but yet, and I do emphasize required, so they may not initially have this fondness or even curiosity for it. So coming from this same background, the same kind of resistance, my challenge was to open up these paths for them, and to consider this medium perhaps to be something of a way to enhance their creative direction. And some of them took very well to it. I had one student who never composed any bit of electronic music whatsoever, and it inspires this student. She In her first real big project, she ended up composing 45 minutes for of incidental music, electronic incidental music for a school production. And
Wow.
I only wanted 5 minutes, but she's a little trooper, and she surprised us all. So
So you're
more power to her.
inspiring the next
Yeah.
generation of
Uh,
composers to pick up electronic music.
Definitely makes me proud. And there's some other superstar students out there. I'm very happy to hear that they've decided to take on this technology and move forward with it. So that's one side of it. To be able to um, craft works that will inspire students, make this kind of genre and approach more palatable to them, so they're not scared of it. I understand what it means to be, very anxious about this fixed electronic thing, as opposed to notated traditional music. And so I'm interested in finding ways to break that ice, and this piece is along that spirit, because it was actually very easy to design. I would come up with a fixed media, elaborate upon it, and
And fixed media, for those of you who
oh,
might not know, is actually just an electronic backtrack that is not it's not changing every time. There's no live processing going on. I click play on the electronic track and then I play flute over it. Um,
yes, just a soundtrack, instead of accompaniment provided, let's say, by a piano. And
Before
so
you go into the piece itself, would you mind sharing just a little bit about how improvisation fits into your like goals for educating the next generation, your vision?
yes, thanks for bringing me back to that. So it's funny, uh phase ensemble is has an interest in improvisation, and they rekindled this interest in improvisation in me. Improvisation has been lost in the classical tradition. You had 18th century da capo arias and your instrumental concertos, where the soloist would be expected to improvise the material, on the spot.
Yeah,
And
we
that's
actually
been,
had Ellen Sauer, an early music specialist, on with Nathan Mondry a couple weeks ago, improvising in a style even earlier than the one you're talking about. It definitely existed in those earlier classical traditions, right? But as I hear you're saying,
yeah,
it's not so much anymore.
it's been lost. It went to jazz for sure, and that continues to today. But I find that it's a realm that could be enhanced and offers creative possibilities for musicians today. And there's much relevance for it. And so it only this focus on improvisation only helps to raise the bar for performers. And I thought that maybe this way with electronics I can shoot two birds with one stone and address both approaches.
I
So that's
totally
the
agree.
improvisatory, and the piece whenever it's played again sounds new. It sounds different. It's never the same thing again. So there's always this draw to it where you don't know what to expect, and maybe you'll, as a listener and a performer, you'll develop more insight into the piece the second or third time around that you've heard it. Um,
I love that.
so that so
And
that's that.
I'm going to actually change the screen for people watching the stream now to the painting, which is your virtual background right now, but I'll just change it to the painting so people can see the whole thing. Um, and you can sort of lead us into performing the piece by telling us
Yeah.
about
So
it.
so so this painting is an early work by Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock, as you know, is well known for his drip paintings. American painter from mostly the mid-century. He was well known for a style called actionism, where paint would be dripped all over the canvas in various ways and in very active, uh, manner, so that there's a there's there's an improvisatory element in that as well. This is an earlier style of his, though. It tends to be more surrealist. This is from the 1930s. I believe it's 1936, if I'm not mistaken. This piece, this painting, is called "Guardians of the Secret," and this is part of the permanent exhibition over at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. I owe them a visit sometime, perhaps when this pandemic is over. Great place, and this painting spoke to me. And what you essentially have here is I see four figures, one flanking both ends of the painting on the left and the right, and then two or maybe three behind the square object in the middle. And the guardians refer to the two flanking figures. They look like armored guardians. And if you buy into the idea that there are also figures behind them, they also would be guarding this object, this rectangular object in the middle. Ironically, that rectangle looks very much like the art from the period following this that Jackson Pollock is most well known for, the sort of drip paintings. This object, this rectangular artifact, is the secret, and basically the painting is describing this fantastic scene in a fantastic landscape where these figures haunting and as they look are guarding this object very fiercely. Beneath the artifact is a coyote, which is the inspiration behind the Kenzie's title for today's recital.
Yeah.
Also a guardian of the sacred object in the center. And should I go into how this ties into the work, the painting, that is?
um, yeah, well, why don't we just tell them about the work one movement at a time? There are three movements. Um,
Yes.
and while this is far from, well, what am I trying to say? It's abstract, but at the same time it's
Figurative.
super, yeah, figurative and evocative of very specific things that you were just describing. I asked Andres to, after reading his program notes, which had very descriptive, literary, vivid words in it, I asked him if he wanted to write a poem for each of the movements. And so he did. Um, and it can help you get into the world that we are sonically painting. Um, it is a dark and mystical world, so I just turned off my lights and put on this LED that is changing colors. And Andre was saying that if you want to turn off your lights, and I don't know, maybe you have a color changing LED too, then it would enhance the experience for you as well. And if you have headphones or earbuds or anything, some parts of this piece are in stereo. So like different calls and sounds come out of different sides of the stage. So that's another thing that you can do if you want to get the full experience a little bit more. So yeah,
Thank you
Andre.
for thank you for reminding for bringing it up because I almost forgot about all that.
I thought it was a great idea, so
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
thanks. Yeah, this piece, is intended to be performed in a dark hall with stereo speakers, and so if you do have headphones, you will be able to hear the stereo spatialization of the fixed media as the performance occurs. So to enhance your experience, if you can turn off the lights and view this on your computer screen, you raise the mystical component of the experience. So I
On the
encourage you
other
to.
hand, if you're feeling like you don't want to go too dark on a Saturday afternoon or morning for some of you, leave the lights on. Keep, doing whatever activity like painting flowers that you're doing, and you can listen to this music and it'll be a really interesting contrast.
So the three movements refer to the three elements I've identified in the painting. The first movement is called Guardians, and that refers to the two or the four figures in the painting, the left and the right. I guess you can call them knights or guardians, and then perhaps the two or three in the middle. Very uh, for me, my interpretation of this painting is that those figures are haunting and very protective of the sacred object in the middle. The second movement is indeed about the artifact, the white rectangular object they are guarding, um, and that artifact is so precious to them and presumably has magical mystical powers, which is why they guard it so fiercely. So that second movement
And I think we
is
can
entitled.
leave the. I'm so sorry for interrupting, but I think we
Oh
can
no, no,
just
no.
talk about each movement, uh,
Oh,
or read your
very.
poem as we go, just because we've chatted a bunch already, and I don't want, and
Oh
because
sure.
humans have short attention spans these
Of
days.
course, of course. Yeah, this piece is very multi-layered.
Yeah, yeah, it is. So let's just get some music going. And
All
I
right,
feel
sounds good.
very self conscious about interrupting you. I did not mean
No,
to.
not
There's
at all.
also something about the lag between me listening to you on Zoom and then it going out to the stream that makes it sound like I am always interrupting you no matter when I
Oh,
come in.
not at
Whoops.
all. Not at
But in
all.
any
Sounds good.
case, yeah, if you want to do your first movement
Yes.
Guardians poem, and then I will play that movement.
Awesome. Here we go. Guardians. Shadowy armored sentinels stand guard with watchful eye upon the secret image, forever shrouded in cold obsidian night. No light of day breaks their steely and menacing gaze. Yet beneath their icy and flinching glare, there is an eternal rancor, a primal horror, a sour and sickening wrath that disdains all who covet this mesmerizing, gleaming ivory enigma. A lone coyote, the fierce sphinx of dark magic, and trickery of the ancient native peoples rests silently beneath the pale relic with a cruel, attentive eye and a bloodless, malicious sneer. The frigid wind whispers, shrieks, bleeds, and cries. It thrashes, erupts, and burns cold. Reason does not reside here, only unrelenting nothingness, an abstract absence, an expansive, shivering desolation. As you breathe before this grotesque spectacle, you bow your head with a weariness of the world, in sweet devotion, in tranquility, in silent agitation.
Go ahead, Andre. I think you are still muted. There you go.
A transparent, diaphanous radiance emanates from the gleaming, iridescent artifact. Its touch is steely smooth and white hot. It both enthralls you and ensances you with an unexpected warmth. Interlocking riddles and secrets at once enlighten one moment and then confound your conscious memories and your unconscious passions the next. But these are the answers you have long desired. These are what you have craved. These are ones that have gnawed at your heart from lonely corners, uttered in your unresolved moments, like crashing, cresting, distant waves at midnight. You awaken in locked rooms eclipsed by time, forbidden spaces and labyrinths that no one dares to mention. You behold truths writ in a mysterious language you may someday understand. Yet these seem strangely familiar, as if you have heard them before, within the cognitive reach of a sweet, disembodied memory.
And that was the second movement, entitled Mythos.
A dark grandeur proceeds from you, lit by the impossible glowing sensation of both knowing and not knowing, beholding and becoming, dying and yet emerging, dying and transcending. It seizes you, and yet it sets you free. You feel the exhilarating rush of a million gusts of wind around you. You become ravished by the fragrant perfumes of a million bouquets that blossom before you. You are mesmerized by a million gleaming, flickering diadems sparkling and spinning below you, gleaming and flickering and dancing above you. There is both an eternal silence and an eternal uproar at once, as truth and light burn bright and beam and breathe from within and without your being. Countless stars stream forth, countless stars dancing, marvelous and monstrous, countless blurring visions, countless fountains that spring in the wilderness, whispers and secrets, haunting vistas, countless convulsing, gaping wounds, a thousand deliriums, and now 1,000 epiphanies. Apocalypse, this grotesque, infernal apocalypse, and now emergence.
And that was the third movement, Emergence.
That was great.
Thank you for trusting me with
Brava.
this largely improvised, I
That was
mean,
awesome.
completely improvised piece.
That was awesome.
Thank you.
You did a great job. Nice.
And the most beautiful thing is, if I were to do it again, it would sound nothing like that. But hopefully, equally as entertaining and evocative.
Sounds great. Yes, you can. I think that performance, lives up to the piece, lives up to the descriptions in the poem. Awesome job. I loved it. Loved
Thank you so much. And thanks for coming on here. And you had a couple more things that you like paired with this piece that I am sharing now with our friends
it.
on Twitch and YouTube. The poem and
Right. Oh,
yeah.
sure. Yes. Oops, my audio. Okay. Yes. So the poems. So the second poem. Actually, let me see here. It was the second. Well, it was definitely the third poem. Oh yes, the second poem. Yes. So.
This is the Immanuel Kant that I am
Oh.
showing
Oh
right now.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is just a quote that I felt uh pretty much um is it goes hand in hand with the this theme of epiphany and transcendence, and trying to grasp the immensity of what this secret you know has. It's this magical power, its effect on you.
Mhm.
I think it definitely can't say that word. It definitely
We get it.
is encapsulate, there we are, captures the spirit of the piece, uh, with regards to the sublime, and so I
Yeah.
thought it'd go well here.
Yeah. I agree. This is great. Um
and if,
I'm looking
and
right
then
now in the chat and wanted to say thank you and I'm glad you liked it to my mom, to Christine, and to Professor Snape. And my guess is that Professor Snape's real name is Andrea, but tell me if I'm wrong about that. um, yeah, glad you liked it. I'm going now to this tribute to Jackson Pollock. You had a
yes,
specific photo that you shared. Um,
definitely, yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on. I want to tie it back to the man who inspired this piece, and pay homage to a great creative mind, um, who's well known by a lot of folks. And so I thought
wow,
that would go great. Yeah.
I didn't know he died so young.
Yeah, he's one of those
Mm,
legends in American culture.
yeah,
Very tragically passed away before. Well, he definitely achieved a lot of fame during his time, but I'm sure there would have been a lot more. But so it is.
yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. It's just I didn't mean to ruin the mood, but Professor Snape just gave me 10 points from Ravenclaw. Don't you mean for Ravenclaw? Okay. We're just not going to pay attention to Professor Snape if he's like taking points from my house. That's inappropriate. I'm sorry. Um great. Jackson Pollock is what we're talking about right now, not
Yeah,
the fact that Professor Snape just tried to take 10 points from my house. That's not allowed. Oh, yeah.
hilarious.
Um, great. Well, I hope you guys all enjoyed this piece, uh, notated, created, conceptualized by Andre. And I think I actually want to just show the music really quick because it's really
Sure.
interesting the way you notated it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I'm just gonna
you
throw
know
up a window capture of the music really clumsily on top of our faces for a second.
uh,
But you can go ahead and talk about it. I'm gonna
yeah.
throw that up.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I take the most common case of notating music traditionally, and with music notation. But given that this was a guided improvisation, I had to take a different approach, leaving room for the performer to make the piece their own, And so there's a lot to look at. I think maybe next time I do something like this, I'll simplify.
I just put it right over our faces. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the only way. Um, and and so things are boxed into categories based upon the parameters of regular music, and I do give indications on pitch and motivic material, and indications on how or what kind of room is involved that the performer can take. But I've also indicated in the front matter that any liberties can be taken with respect to this the presentation of this work. This is just a sort of formal guideline, but the performer can digress from this at any time,
Yeah. I
based
love it. I
upon.
love it.
Yeah. And so for those for those performers who are new to improvisation or new to electronic music, there are timestamps involved. There are descriptions, so you're not reinventing the wheel. There is room to sort of provide your own interpretation, and you can always do away with that. If you're in the middle of the improvisation and you want to do something else, that's fine too. This is intended to respond to various skill levels among performers, so that and the design of the fixed media is always present, and so presumably there will always be something interesting at any given moment in case the performer needs to drop out or takes a moment to recover. um, it should still have this interest in the audience, so in the
Yeah.
listener.
Cool. Thanks for sharing a little bit more about the notation. It's fascinating to me. I have seen lots of different kinds of notation for like improvised sections in chamber music and entirely improvised pieces. And this is the thing that I really love about this is you don't adhere at all to traditional notation. Well, okay, a little bit to show the pitches, but it's like there's no staff, there's no group of staves here because to do that would just be to go from a starting point that is irrelevant. When really
Yes.
just giving the timestamps is makes a lot more sense, and so you just went straight to that, and I love that.
Yeah, and
So I'm just gonna.
I think it works well. Like for instance, this format that you've come up with, because if it doesn't need to be synchronous to really anything. You can detect markers in the sound design, but there's this flexibility and freedom that is associated with the piece, and so it's helpful for folks of different skill levels. So
Great. Yes. So if anybody watching is an improvising musician, uh, this actually doesn't only have to be for flute, right? You told me
and
that
right,
too.
yes,
And
I it was. Yeah, yes, thank you. Thanks for reminding me.
yeah,
Um, it was originally conceived for flute. In fact, the fixed media does contain samples of Jerry's flute playing. But I've opened this piece up such that any instrument, just about any instrument, can perform this work. I think that given the spirit of improvisation and spontaneity, that approach is works out well. And so yeah, anyone wants
great.
to try it out, you're just let me know.
Yeah. And I think we're gonna wrap it up around now because I can't remember if I said this at the beginning, but my looping hardware, my looping hardware is acting pretty crazy and finicky today for some reason. I think there's just a curse where you can't get all the technology to work on any one given day. So since all of these different backgrounds and scenes worked today, the loop station is not working today. So yeah, so we're just just talking about Andre's piece. I think it was good because any loop that I would play is a totally different mood and might uh take away from the experience. Plus, we're coming up on an hour, so I think that's pretty good uh length for today. Next week, I will be back here doing I have no idea what. Um but probably around the same time if you follow me on Instagram or my Facebook page, which is /Fusion Flute on Facebook. I'll post about it there. And Is there anything else that I wanted to say? Oh yeah. If you think it's fun and interesting to watch me improvise on flute, I am in the near future going to be accompanying a troupe of very talented theatrical improvisers called PGraph, parallelogram, monogram, phonograph. I think that's why they shortened it because I can't actually say the full name, but that is either tomorrow or not. And again, it's still in flux. So if you follow me on Instagram or on Twitch or YouTube or on Facebook, you can find out the details there. But thanks everybody for watching. Andre, thanks for the millionth time that I've said to you, I've been so
Thank you,
appreciative of you
Kenzie.
coming on. And
Thank you for
I'm
having
gonna
me.
stop the stream. So bye everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.